Hello, welcome to this writing skill video on pronouns. So we're going to examine pronouns and how to make sure we're using them with clarity and with proper agreement and fairness. So let's take a look at some examples of what causes the problems. They seem like very simple words, they're very short words. You may recall that they are words that replace a noun, so things like he, she, it, or they can be possessive, yours, mine, ours. So they're these little words that refer to something else that you've mentioned before, some other noun, okay? So even though they're very short little words, they cause all sorts of problems, unfortunately. So what are those problems? First of all, the clarity of the antecedent. The antecedent is that thing that the pronoun refers to, or the person that is referred to. So for example, if you're talking about a woman, you might at some point switch to she or her instead of always saying woman, right? So it replaces that noun. So you have to be sure, though, that you are clear about what the antecedent is. It shouldn't be a treasure hunt for your reader trying to figure out what you mean when you're using a pronoun. So make sure that that is always clear, what you're referring to. Okay, and then also there can be problems with number agreement, since some pronouns are singular and some are plural. So for example, he, she, and it are singular while they is plural, okay? So you have to make sure that the number of that pronoun agrees with the antecedent, okay? And problems with this arise because of the gendering of our pronouns, and that leads us to biased use. You have to be careful that you're not revealing or unintentionally being biased in your use of pronouns. Again, this arises because we do gender our pronouns, he and she, for example, okay, referring to male and female subjects, okay? And also there are a few other problems that arise just from inappropriate habits that we use verbally. For example, using the first person inappropriately. It's not always wrong to use I, but they can be used problematically, where it's an unnecessary self-reference that actually weakens our writing, or vague use of the second person. We'll take a look at that too, okay? So let's look at some examples here. So the first one, I spent 3 hours looking for the place to turn in my paper. You shouldn't have to do that. That's an example of the vague you that people sometimes use, and it really doesn't refer to anything specific. It doesn't have a specific antecedent. What is probably meant here is something along the lines of I shouldn't have to do that, or people in general shouldn't have to do that, which you is not the proper pronoun for that. So try to get rid of that habit of using that vague you that has no clear antecedent. Also, when a student registers for class, they will have to pay the tuition. So notice that a student is singular and they is plural. So something's off here. This again relates to the gendering of pronouns. Someone who says this is probably trying to avoid the fact that our pronouns in the singular are gendered. So they made it plural inappropriately because the antecedent is a student, which is singular. Okay, so we'll talk about how to fix that and get around some of those problems. Here's an example of biased assumptions showing up in pronoun use. I don't care who the next president is, but he should have to release his tax returns. Now, clearly from the sentence, the president hasn't been chosen, right? But he and his are used with the assumption that presidents are always male, okay? So be careful with that and examine how you're using gendered pronouns. And the next one here, I am tired of the traffic near downtown. They should add another lane in the highway, to the highway. So they is sometimes used very vaguely to refer to people in general or to authority figures. You know, they should have to fix something. It's better to specify what you actually mean there because there's no clear reference there. And here's an example of sticking in personal references that don't really need to be there. I feel that community college should be tuition free. Really better is to just eliminate that and say things directly. So let's look at how to get around some of these problems. So first of all, number agreement. When a customer buys something there, they are automatically put on the email list. So notice it's a customer as the reference, but they is plural. So we've got to get those in agreement. So the second example fixes that problem. When a customer buys something there, he or she is automatically put on the email list. So now it's singular. And because it's gendered, we have to say he or she, which can feel a little awkward. So there's often ways to get around that problem. Okay, so sometimes it's better to actually change the referent instead of the pronoun. So I would consider the last example under number agreement to be better than the second example. When customers, notice that's plural now, when customers buy something there, they are automatically put on the email list. So now customers and they are matching. Okay, so sometimes you can change the antecedent to be plural so it'll match your plural pronoun. And then you've bypassed the gender issue as well. Okay, now in speaking of the gender issue, be careful about biased assumptions appearing in your paper when you didn't really intend that. So if a student is interested in sports writing, he should begin by writing stories for his high school paper. So the antecedent is singular, a student, right? And then this writer has assumed that anybody interested in sports writing would be a he, right? Would be male, which of course isn't really true. There's plenty of women and girls interested in becoming sports writers, right? So you can't assume that all of them should be he unless you intend to be deliberately biased, right? So here's a better version. If students are interested in sports writing, they should begin by writing stories for their high school newspaper. So you can make it plural. That's one way around that issue. But you can be even more concise in this way. Students interested in sports writing should begin by writing stories for their high school paper. Okay? So that eliminated a little bit of the wordiness and that biased assumption problem. Okay? Okay, now the vague antecedent problem. Here's an example that might be vague within a paper, especially if there were no referent preceding it immediately in a previous sentence. One of the most important days in American history was when they signed the Declaration of Independence. So, unless it's absolutely clear in the preceding sentence what they is referring to, it's best to just say it outright. So this completes the thought a little bit better. One of the most important days in American history was when members of the Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence. So now we're clear about who the they is. Sometimes it's best just go ahead and put the thing you're referring to in the sentence to be clear about who the they is. Okay, now, and there's also, as I mentioned, a problem with weak use of first and second person. Here's an example that uses both, that incorporates both of those problems. So I feel that you shouldn't have to pay more than $50 for car registration. So first of all, you have that unnecessary insertion of the personal pronoun in there, the first person pronoun. Other examples of that are things like I think, or in my opinion, or it seems to me, or something like that. Those kind of references, again, are verbal habits that we should drop from our academic writing. It is sometimes okay to use I if you're writing a narrative, or if you are talking about your personal experience. If it's appropriate to the assignment, ask your professor if you're not sure if it's okay to tell personal stories in your paper. Sometimes it's not. So, but you want to avoid these unnecessary self-references for sure, okay? And also the vague you. Who is the you here? So to make the thought more complete and make it more concise as well, you can say exactly who the you is you're talking about. In this case, it's really drivers, right? So drivers shouldn't have to pay more than $50 for car registration. So notice by dropping the vague I and the vague you, the statement is really stronger as well and much more concise, okay? So those are some of the problems that come up with pronouns. If you need more review of this concept, if you need more help in the context of your papers as well, you can check out the Rough Rider's Guide, Section 9, Chapter 39. It goes into details about pronoun use. Also, you can visit a Yavapai College Learning Center tutor. They can help you directly with that. Just mention that that's what you would like to work on. Or you can, of course, contact your instructor, either by email or by visiting their office hours. Okay? So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hope to see you again soon in another episode of Writing Skills.